is classical conditioning. And classical conditioning is all about anticipation. Pavlov noticed, he was actually a physiologist, and he noticed when he was doing experiments on salivation in the dog, and he was getting meat prepared for the dog to eat, or meat powder prepared for the dog to eat to make it salivate, he noticed the dog was starting to salivate before he even opened the cupboard door. Like when he'd opened the laboratory door, the dog was already drooling. And he started to think, this is a kind of weird learning process that is yet undescribed. And it's Pavlovian conditioning. And what it means to us as trainers is if we want to teach a horse a voice command or a light aid, it must come first. And I think many of the trainers here are good at explaining that, and explaining that, you know, when you want to teach the horse to move forward and with a voice command, walk on or whatever, just say walk on first. Walk on, then the pressure. If you say walk on at the same time as the pressure, he will learn it, but it's many times slower. If you say walk on after you do the pressure, he will not learn it at all. So it's made purely to be at the front. And we do the same thing with the elephants. We give them a voice command, followed by the light pressure, followed by the stick tap if he doesn't go forward, and when he goes forward, then the good boy, and then we give him the food. So it follows this kind of train. But I just want to explain why this is so important, this pressure release, because you see, there are all these methods around. Now, many people who do these various head carriages, whether it's the high frame, the low frame, or the horrible frame, either all of them, if they have strong mouth pressure, are just as bad as each other, to be perfectly honest. They all can produce learned helplessness. You see, because animals in general learn these light aids, learn these signals as a way of predicting responses so they can give the answer. That's what the light aid is always about. And when they're confused, they start to show active coping mechanisms, bucking, rearing, shying, leaping. Their heart rate goes up, their blood pressure goes up. It's quite similar to cutaneous pain. When these mechanisms don't work, the stressor doesn't leave them, the rider doesn't come off, the horse gets punished for bucking, and if it's a case of his confusion that's causing it, the next thing he can do is start developing a tolerance, which is a passive coping mechanism whereby his heart rate goes down, his blood pressure goes down. It's more similar to deep visceral pain, and that's the horse that's heading down the slippery slope towards learned helplessness, which is not something you can directly define or observe. You can't say that animal's got learned helplessness unless it was completely dead, dull, and doesn't move at all from any aid. But if it still moves, but it's looking like it's dull and it's got spur marks so it can tolerate pain that it would never have tolerated in breaking in stage, then you could say it's somewhere down that track of learned helplessness. And that's what we've got to avoid. So for me, it's so much about lightness and self-carriage and reintroducing self-carriage back into all our horse sports, particularly dressage, because it's now heading down the slope where it's the worst at it. It's untenable to me to think that you should have X kilos in your hand when you ride. It's got to be just the weight of the reins. That's the real communication between the horse and the rider. So for the horse, learned helplessness develops when pain is or even any kind of pressure is unpredictable, uncontrollable from his point of view, and inescapable. The question is, if the horse is coming out of learned helplessness, like you're retraining him, you're making his life much clearer, does he show some active coping mechanisms? I think they do, but there's no literature on horses that have ever emerged from it, because generally when animals have fully blown learned helplessness, see the studies done on this were with rats using electric shocks, or dogs actually, using electric shocks, and then later with rats. And that was such a full-blown learned helplessness, they never came out of it. They were completely unused, and some of them died. So it's a fatal kind of disease. But probably in the early stages of those confusions and passive coping mechanisms, you know, I think that it's kind of a good thing that they do maybe show some active mechanisms. But our job is to make sure we don't confuse animals so they make these active mechanisms. See, if we train horses to be really clear about our work in hand, the signals for go and stop in hand and standing still, and don't let them get controlled by the environment where, you know, it's a pussycat walking along the wall that made him suddenly shy 50 metres. And under saddle, we teach him to go very clearly from the leg and rein aids. Then you'll find that the horse won't be showing these active coping mechanisms. He's got no reason to. So all of these things that he does, he's not consciously trying to tell us, I don't believe that we're doing something wrong. It's just a natural defense mechanism that comes up that is our sign that we're doing something wrong.